Hello, welcome to the San Diego La Raza Lawyers Association Judicial Reception. My name is Fernando Tafoya. I'm the immediate past president of the San Diego La Raza Lawyers Association. Every year we have an annual event that is called the Judicial Reception. Usually we have this event live, but this year, because of the coronavirus, we're doing it on film. People always ask us, why do we do a judicial reception on an annual basis? And our response is, it's the way that us as an association are able to give back to the legal community, especially the judges that hear our cases every day. And we look forward every year to awarding a special award to a justice that is really taking care of our communities and advocating justice in every case that that judge attends to. Now, we know that San Diego is many times described as America's finest city. We also think that San Diego also has America's finest judiciary. So before the awards are presented, I'd like to introduce one of the major sponsors from Jackson Lewis. Jackson Lewis is a firm that has supported La Raza Lawyers Association, and it's also supported the judicial reception for a number of years. Their litigation manager is Guillermo Escobedo, who's a member of our board. He is a very distinguished alumni from the University of San Francisco. He's made a name for himself in San Diego. He's a tough litigator. He represents a law firm that seeks justice and defends their clients vehemently. I know this personally because I've been up against them. So before we proceed to the awards, let me introduce litigation manager of Jackson Lewis, Mr. Guillermo Escobedo. Mr. Escobedo.
Hello, my name is Guillermo Escobedo. I'm a board member of La Raza Lawyers and co-chair of the Judicial Reception. I would like to thank the law firm of Jackson Lewis for sponsoring this event and serving as a long-term ally of La Raza Lawyers. Thank you for supporting our mission statement and recognizing that the fight for equality and justice is more than just a social media post. It requires a long-term commitment to training, to promotion, to mentorship, to opportunity, and supporting organizations like La Raza Lawyers. As a principal in the San Diego office of Jackson Lewis, I'm proud to say we walk arm in arm with La Raza Lawyers. I would also like to encourage other law firms and all businesses and organizations to join us in our effort to increase diversity and inclusion in the workplace, including an increase of Latino lawyers in applying for the bench to become judges. And with that, I would like to introduce the president of La Raza Lawyers, Rafael Hurtado. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Congratulations. We are honored to award you the Judicial Officer of the Year Award from the San Diego La Raza Lawyers. As you know, our mission is to advance the causes of equality and justice and empower the Latino community here in San Diego County. And so I just want to congratulate you on that. We have our plaque over there and some beautiful flowers.
Well, thank you so much, really, for the honor. I am so honored to receive this recognition for a job that I love so much and I'm so passionate about. So I very much appreciate the honor. The award is beautiful and the flowers as well. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, and it's our honor to be able to have this conversation with you and learn more about your story. I know one important point that you want to communicate to the community is that there are about 35%, our population in San Diego County of Latinos is about 35%. However, we only have about 11% of Latino judges on the bench here in San Diego County. So there's a big discrepancy there, a lot of work to do in order to get the Latino community more represented on the bench. But while I was thinking about that, I was thinking about your story and how you exemplify all the hurdles that need to be overcome in order to get to that point. You have shown a love for the community, a love for children, a love for justice, and I want to explore that and how you were able to get to that point so that you can give us an example of what it means to be a judge. You had that support that eventually led you to college, and you went to the University of San Diego. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about your time there? And I believe that you were there in the late 70s and early 80s into law school.
Right. So the one thing that my parents, particularly my father, always said to me and to all of us is to go to college. That was the mantra. You graduate from high school, you go to college. So that was always in my head since a little girl, that I knew I was going to go to college. My mother did not go to college. My dad did, and as part of the military service, he was able to expand his education there too. So I wanted actually to go outside of San Diego and just to spread my wings and see what else was out there. But my parents wanted me to stay local, and they certainly wanted me to continue to live with them, which was very traditionally, how they approach things. But I didn't want to have that college experience. So I chose the University of San Diego, where I could still live in San Diego, but I also asked to live, excuse me, in the dorms, and to get some bit of that kind of college experience, which was just a lot of fun. So it was a great experience at USD. I loved it very much. I did some work with the deaf community there. I went to Gallaudet College also for the deaf for the summer. At that time, my focus was on special education, and that's where I thought my path was going to lead. And of course, it took a different direction.
Mm-hmm. And that direction led you to Defenders Incorporated. Is that right?
Right. So that was my my first job after law school. I will tell you, law school was not on my radar. Even growing up, I never met a lawyer, knew a lawyer. I mean, that wasn't just part of my family community. The idea of being a lawyer came from me living on campus at USD and having a roommate whose plan was to go to law school. And I thought to myself, God, that syncs up with some of what I have experienced in my life. When I was 12, 13, I would write poetry about justice, and I don't know, it was just important to me to recognize that fairness and equality, and even as a young, preteen teenager, I would write stories about that, write poetry about that. And then in college, I worked with learning disabled teenagers in the Grossmont district as a volunteer. And I found myself drawn more, education was very important and critical, but I found myself more wanting to help those kids with some of the problems they had in the community and their families. And I also volunteered in a state hospital up in the Los Angeles area with severely disabled young people. And I remember thinking to myself then, I want to do something where I have the power to make a difference in their lives. So all of these experiences I had, this was all pre-law school, kind of came together when I had this roommate who was going to go to law school, and that's when it just sort of clicked to me, well, maybe that's something I can do. Again, it wasn't part of my experience. I could tell you my parents were very nervous about it because it wasn't part of their experience. It sounded like really hard and difficult, and they weren't, I would say they weren't the most encouraging of that. But ultimately, of course, supported that decision to go. And obviously, I was very glad that I was able to do it. I will tell another story. I tell whenever I talk to young people, the first day I went to law school, the very first day, I went up to the second floor going into a classroom, and there was about 50 people there. Most of them were white. There were some women there, but nobody looked like me. And I walked in the class, and this is true, I turned around and walked out. And I said, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. This isn't me. I went out to the patio, and if you're familiar with USD, there's a kind of patio on the second floor, and I stood on the patio, and I just took a deep breath, and I looked around, and there were other people who appeared to be kind of nervous. This is the first day of law school, too. I took a deep breath, said, well, this is what you wanted to do. Go in, work hard, do your best. You can do it. And so I turned around, went back in, sat in the classroom, and the rest, I graduated. So but it was quite a roller coaster ride for me. Just I think emotionally, getting to that point.
What gives you that strength and that courage? What allows you to have those moments of pause and encourage yourself?
Well, what drove me that day was I really wanted to work in the community and serve the people within our community. There was just something deep down inside of me that told me that I could help children and families. At the time, I was also interested in working with perhaps the elderly. And it was that kind of deep inside that just sort of forced me forward. And so when I talk to young people, I'm always telling them, find your passion, whatever that is. You know, it's deep in your gut. And it's interesting how things kind of come together at the right time and the right moment, and you just got to just kind of strike while the iron's hot. Here I am, got in law school, first day. I want to do this. I want to be a lawyer. I want to help people. I want to serve in the community. And so it was that kind of gut which just really drove me forward and helped me through those 3 years. Because again, this was not part of my experience. It wasn't like other law students there who had parents who were lawyers or judges. I mean, I didn't have any of that. Right. So it was more challenging for me in some ways because of that. But I also found a community of law students too who had similar experiences. And so I think their support helped as well.
How did that propel you through your career as a lawyer and then as a bench, or sorry, then on the bench? Since neither of those paths had been in your background.
Right. Well, you know, when I graduated, again, there was a couple of areas of interest for me. You know, where can I most serve, you know, my community? And one area I thought about was working as a legislative aide, going to Sacramento, perhaps, and doing that. I had actually applied for and received a job to work in Sacramento, to work in the legislature. But the other was I wanted to be comfortable in the courtroom. I envisioned myself arguing and advocating on behalf of children and families, frankly. And I thought it would be best for me to get that experience, because again, that wasn't part of my background. And so I decided to go to Defenders Inc. I had gotten accepted there, of course, as, to be an attorney, and that brought me my very first job. It was right here in juvenile court. So it was interesting how kind of the paths crossed, because I was interested in education. I worked with hearing impaired children. I learned sign language so that I could really speak with them and help support them. I'd worked in a orthopedically handicapped kindergarten class back in high school, and I told you about my experience working with some severely disabled young people at a state hospital. So all of those experiences kind of came back to me working in Defenders, where I was working here down in juvenile court, advocating for children and families going through a system. And so that's what I mean. It's interesting how you're kind of those interests that just kind of come together. And so once I landed here in juvenile court, I loved it. I just loved it. I represented children accused of crime, represented parents whose kids were taken away, also represented children who had been taken away. And it was here in juvenile court where I met my husband, who represented children who on the juvenile justice side of the house. And he'd been doing this for about 10 years before I arrived. It
sounds like you never chose the easy path, right? You chose a path that you didn't know you were going to take. It was a little bit of unknown. Mm-hmm. You went and advocated for children and families in really difficult situations. Mm-hmm. That's not just difficult in a legal aspect, but it's also emotionally taxing, I can imagine. And you stand up to big guys, even without any qualms, it sounds like. You've always broken ground, is what I'm getting at, right? For yourself and for your community, and that even led you to, as you mentioned, establish the Office of Children's Counsel at the Public Defender's Office, which didn't exist before. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, this was, again, back in the late 80s, early 90 period, where the representation of children in foster care was not very well developed. Attorneys back then, many of them who represented children, really did it for the paycheck. They didn't go out and meet the kids. They didn't, they relied on social worker reports without really doing independent investigation. And that kind of practice concerned me. I felt that kids did have a voice and should have an independent voice, and that took maybe rolling up your sleeves and kind of diving in, seeing your clients, the kids, seeing their environment that they're in, learning more about them, doing your own independent work to see what might be in the best interest of the child. So back then, again, that was not the kind of practice typically that you would see in the juvenile courts. So I decided I wanted to specialize in that area. And how best to do it would be, at the time I was working in the public defender's office, I was still here in juvenile court. I went to the public defender and I said, look, this is what I'd like to do, create this office. And he was very supportive of doing that, and gave me a couple of lawyers, a couple of investigators, clerical staff. We started as a small kind of pilot. At the end of the first year, our presiding judge at the time in juvenile was very pleased with the quality of the work that we did. So this office then got brought before the Board of Supervisors, and then we got funding to help support our greater effort, expanded our offices. And so that office existed for some 20 years, and still existed at the time that I was appointed to the bench.
Many of us don't, even as lawyers, may not be familiar with the appointment process. And I want to understand, in 2008, or in the early 2000s is when you were undergoing that process. Mm-hmm. What was that like for you, and who supported you, and what was that process like for those of us that may be thinking about going through that process ourselves?
So it has been 12 years. I can't believe 12 years now as a judge. You know, but back then, before I put the application in, it took me 5 years to get to that point. And a big part of it was, well, there was two reasons really. One, I loved my job. I mean, representing children was so incredibly rewarding. You saw a lot of sad things too. And there were a lot of bad days, but more likely than not, every day you made that much of a difference in the life of a child. And so that's what propelled me through that career. And I loved it. I just loved it. And so it was hard to leave it. And it took me a couple of years to really kind of get to the point where, you know, I think I've done good work here. I helped create state rules of court. I helped enhance the quality of representation of children in San Diego County. I was involved in legislation, helping or enhancing education rights of kids in foster care. So I felt really good about all those accomplishments. But the person who kept pushing me to apply was my husband. And so finally I just kind of hunkered down, because I had the application. I mean, it was sitting really on our coffee table for years. And I finally bunkered down, and it took me a couple of weekends, because it was an onerous application. I mean, it's quite the process. You know, remembering all your cases, those top cases, and who the attorneys were, and what it was about, what was the result, who was the judge. I mean, so what I tell my son, who is a lawyer now, I don't know that he'll ever decide to be a judge, but I say to him, keep track of all your cases, your big cases. Just jot it down, put it somewhere in an office, because you never know when you might need that kind. So that's my message also to others who might be watching this, is really keep track of those cases that are significant in your mind. You just never know. Because it took me a while to dig some of that stuff out. So I spent several weekends getting that application prepared. I finally got it submitted. And I was just beyond surprised to get the call. This was from Judge Majors Lewis, who's now Judge Majors Lewis, of course, who was appointment secretary under Schwarzenegger. Less than a year to get a call from her. And honest to goodness, this is another thing, this is true, and I tell this too, that she calls me to tell me that the governor wanted to appoint me to the bench. And I was thinking somebody was messing with me. I thought, wait, what? Who's this? And then finally, oh my God, this is really her. And I had my youngest son at home. And I'm like, oh my God, jumping up, you know, and just so excited. I mean, it was such an honor. And of course, immediately I told my parents and my family, and everybody was so happy and proud. I mean, just what a moment. There's just these moments in time that I'll never forget. That's one of them.
What is your message to lawyers, but also college students or any Latino that wants to think about being a judge?
So, first of all, being a judge is just the most amazing career and job. Every day still, I am so thankful for the position that I have. Many days pinch myself still. I can't believe that I'm here. I was so honored to be selected to be a judge. every day coming into the court and working and doing the best I can to serve the community in front of me, the children and the families, giving them a voice, making sure I hear their voice, hearing all voices in the courtroom and then making that decision. I think as we talked earlier, we know that approximately 35% of our San Diegans are Latinos. Only 11% of Latinos are on the bench. And we're concerned because we're going to be losing some folks. We know Judge Esteban Hernandez is going to be retiring in just a matter of weeks. We have a couple of other senior judges who are potentially retiring next year. So we don't want to lose ground. Luckily, we have a couple of Latino lawyers in the pipeline, so we're hoping for good things there. But we want to be the face of the community. We want to be up to that 35% if we can, but it's going to take a lot of work. And I think part of it is building the pipeline. When I was a supervising judge in South Bay, I really encouraged to reach out to the South Bay community schools and to do mock trials in our courtroom to try to get young people in the South Bay to think about, working in the law. So I think that's important in the elementary schools, going into the middle schools. There's programs now to be able to increase our efforts to do that. High schools, colleges, of course, and then in law schools and young lawyers. So one of the things that we did as Latino judges, and you might have heard about this, is we just recently created the San Diego Latino Judges Association. We're an affiliate of the California Latino Judges Association, and we have two committees. One is community outreach, and so we're going to focus our efforts on helping develop that pipeline to get more of these young people to think about lawyers, becoming lawyers, and then lawyers becoming judges. And then we're going to have I can't remember the exact title, but it's like a judicial support or advisory committee where we're willing to mentor young lawyers who want to someday be a judge and give advice about what are the things that you need to do. We're willing to review applications to be submitted. We're happy to do that. So we've just started, but really a lot of that effort came from the fact that we want to get to that higher number of Latino judges on the bench. And then from there, of course, increase the leadership among Latino judges with our court. So I'm very fortunate to be the presiding judge of the juvenile court. That was, again, one of those dreams and hopes way back in the day that someday I would get here. So I just started in January, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity that the court gave me to put me in this position. We had Judge Kiki Camarena, who was supervising a family, and of course he's in South Bay now. So we're wanting to bring more Latino judges to the bench and really increase our visibility on the bench and get more involved in leadership opportunities as well. So, I am really hopeful that there are lawyers out there who think about becoming a judge. When I do talk to young lawyers, I talk to them about being involved in the kinds of the activities that you all are doing right now. Be visible, be involved, be the best that you can be as a lawyer too, because we talk about that as judges. Well, who are the lawyers that we think maybe we'd like to encourage to apply for the bench? And it's lawyers who have stellar reputations, strong work ethics, who are just solid, litigators or doing a variety of other kind of work. Remember, back in my day, it wasn't common to appoint a lawyer who worked in dependency cases. It was mostly prosecutors, right? And so now I think there's a broader net in looking at who could be a judge. And that started, I think it's probably started a little bit under Schwarzenegger, then with Brown, and I think Newsom is going to be doing the same. So it's not just litigators, but other works that you do, as long as you do your best, you have a solid reputation, you get involved in the community, you make yourself known, you stand out. And again, there's that committee of judges who are willing and are available to help mentor those lawyers and help them get to that finish line.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. We at the La Raza lawyers have definitely noticed the enthusiasm that's coming from the bench. And from hearing your story, and knowing that we didn't even get to talk about so many of your accomplishments as supervising judge in South Bay, the behavioral program that you worked on there, and I'm sure so many others that we could talk about. But I do know that the common thread is that you're no stranger to breaking new ground. And if this is something that's never done before, increasing the number of judges to the bench, or Latino judges on the bench in San Diego County, then I know we have the expertise here in front of us, and we want to thank you for that leadership that you and your colleagues on the bench are taking. We appreciate it that you guys are looking to invest in our Latino community, and whatever we can do to help, we're here to help as best as we can. So thank you, Judge España. Congratulations again. We are very honored to have you as part of our community.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for the recognition. I'm so honored. Thank you again.
Thanks.